The Galactic Council tortured an innocent human child. So humanity made them pay with blood and fire until the ashes of their burning worlds choked the stars. Jacob and Mary Coleman loved taking vacations to the far reaches of space. This time, they brought their 10-year-old son, Timmy, along to a resort world near the neutral zone at the border of Pakled territory. The Paklids were a brutish warrior race of hulking gray aliens, known for starting conflicts over minor slights. But their ongoing tensions with the Galactic Council had not yet boiled over into open war. On the third day of their trip, Jacob and Mary let Timmy explore the resort's lush wilderness trails while they relaxed by the pool. When he didn't return for lunch, they started to worry. Resort security found no trace of him. After a frantic day of searching, Jacob and Mary realized the horrible truth. Their son had been abducted, and there was only one group who would dare snatch a human child in neutral space: the Paklids. Timmy was taken to a Paklid warship where he was beaten, drugged, and interrogated about Earth's defenses and the Sol system. The sadistic Paklid commander delighted in torturing the small human boy to the point of death, only to roughly patch him up and start all over again. The Paklids were secretly preparing to launch a devastating surprise attack against humanity. And thanks to Timmy, they now knew just where to strike. Desperate and terrified, Jacob and Mary pleaded with the Galactic Council to intervene and rescue their boy. But the Council, led by the sneering alien worm Ambassador Vox, dismissed their cries for help. One child was not worth risking a war with the Paklids. Vox all but laughed them out of the room. The Council refused to act. But Jacob and Mary would not abandon their son. Jacob still had contacts from his days in the military. Within a day, he had armed himself to the teeth and stolen a stealthed Reaver-class assault boat from a decommissioned Spec Ops base. That very night, he kissed Mary goodbye and gunned his engines to chase after the Paklids. He would bring his boy home or die trying. Tracing comm signals and sifting through flight data, Jacob hunted the Paklid ship as it moved through the neutral zone. A week later, he finally caught up. The Paklid ship was a massive gray dagger bristling with armaments. It could obliterate Jacob's tiny attack craft in seconds, so Jacob did what humans do best. He improvised. Matching velocity with the warship's plasma vents, he short-circuited his Reaver's stealth field and rode the energy surge, appearing inside the Paklid's shields with all his weapons locked and loaded. Before the Paklids even realized they were under attack, Jacob had drilled a burning hole right through their hull and boarded. Bellowing a war cry, Jacob stormed through the alien ship, his rifle barking and his sword slashing. He was a whirlwind of death, cutting down every Paklid in his path, their 8-foot frames shuddering as his rounds tore them apart. Alarms blared and gray blood ran thick, but Jacob wouldn't stop, until he found his son. In a dark cell deep in the warship's bowels, he discovered Timmy, broken, bleeding, barely alive. Jacob sobbed as he cradled his boy and stemmed his wounds. Then he carried Timmy back to his ship, leaving a string of primed DEET charges in his wake. He blasted free of the Paklid vessel and fled at full burn, just as the charges ignited and fire blossomed through the enemy ship. The warship split apart, spewing debris and bodies as Jacob rocketed away with Timmy finally safe in his arms. Timmy almost didn't survive his horrific wounds. For weeks, he lingered near death in a hospital bed, as the finest physicians on Earth fought to save him. Overcome with rage and grief, Jacob confronted the Galactic Council again, describing the unspeakable trauma inflicted on his son. But Ambassador Vox simply shrugged and said, "This is why primitive races like yours do not belong in galactic affairs. What is one human child compared to the stability of 1,000 worlds?" At that moment, staring into Vox's pitiless alien eyes, Jacob swore his revenge. He would make the Galactic Council regret their craven inaction and disdain for human life. He would scorch their arrogance from the stars in 1,000 cleansing fires. And if it took the combined military might of all humanity to do it, then so be it. The Galactic Council had tortured a human child and shrugged it off as insignificant. So humanity would teach them the error of their ways and ensure they never made that mistake again, as they watched the Council's vaunted 1,000 worlds burn. Jacob's rage burned hotter than 1,000 suns as he called up his old squad mates and mercenary contracts. He needed killers, stone-cold professionals who could strike without hesitation or mercy. His first calls were to Mike Tanner and Luis Ortega. Mike showed up with a scowl and scars, assault rifle already slung over his shoulder. His sister's death in a Pakled raid was an open wound that would never heal. Luis came with his hollow projector and data pad, fingers flying over the keys, hungry for the intel that would let him slit the throats of the council bastards who murdered his parents. Together, they became the Terran Justice Squad, a fist of vengeance humanity could swing at the galaxy. They struck like lightning, raiding supply depots, blowing data hubs, and leaving smoldering craters where secret council facilities used to be. On the burning wreckage, they always scrawled the same message, for Timmy. The council branded them terrorists and posted enormous bounties on their heads. But no matter how hard Vox squeezed, he couldn't stop the leaks. Sensitive files wormed through the extranet, exposing the council's ugliest secrets to the galaxy. The vids of Pac-led soldiers gleefully mutilating human children were the most damning of all. The council wants humanity subservient and afraid, Mary explained in one Galactic news interview that spread like wildfire. So they let our children be tortured while wagging their fingers and calling for caution. No more. Humanity won't be cowed by their civilized sadism any longer. Her words sparked outrage across 100 worlds. Protests erupted outside council embassies. Senators demanded investigations, and whistleblowers came forward with even more damning evidence of the council's crimes and hypocrisy. Rebellions lit up the night skies on a dozen worlds, and long-oppressed species launched strikes and uprisings. The council's iron grip began to crack and strain. Vox couldn't let billions see him bleed. This human rebellion had to be crushed immediately and totally. He tripled the bounties on the Terran Justice Squad and declared them hostis publicus, enemies of galactic civilization. The most vicious mercenaries and bounty hunters in the universe took up the hunt, led by the legendary Zax Blade. Zax caught the squad's trail on a remote refueling planet, tracking the radiation spoor of Luis's hacking gear. His mercs fell on the humans in a lethal ambush, plasma and bullets flying. The squad gave as good as they got, fighting like lions. Mike and Luis took down a dozen mercs between them before Zax's particle beams disintegrated Luis's arm from the elbow down and blew a hole the size of a dinner plate through Mike's guts. Jacob dragged his bloody friends to their ship, heartbroken at leaving Luis's body behind as they fled. He could only pray that Luis's dog tags made it back to his husband on Earth. Mike barely clung to life as their ship limped away to a safe harbor where they could patch his ravaged body. He gripped Jacob's hand with a shaking fist and hissed through bloody teeth, "Promise me we'll kill that gray freak for Luis," before he succumbed to emergency sedation. Jacob sat in the blood-splattered hold, Mike's unconscious form beside him, and realized his crew couldn't do this alone anymore. The council was too strong, and Zax too relentless. They needed allies with ships and soldiers of their own. So Jacob started reaching out to every rebel group and resistance cell he could find. The Kralik Liberation Front, the Chulatek Underground, the Orion Irregulars. Species he'd never even heard of, all oppressed and exploited by the council for centuries, answered his call. Soon the comm channels buzzed with 1,000 voices, in dozens of alien tongues all saying the same thing. The Galactic Council's day of reckoning had finally come. Jacob smiled for the first time in months as he watched the messages pour in. He checked the auto-doc readout to confirm Mike was stable, then sent a coded data burst to Mary on Earth. "It's happening," he told her. "Keep Timmy safe. We're going to burn the council until its ashes choke the stars. I love you." She replied moments later, "I believe in you. Make them pay." Jacob flicked off the console and began plotting a course. The road ahead would be paved in blood and fire, but one way or another, the Galactic Council would fall. Jacob knew they needed more firepower to take on the council. His contacts led him to rumors of a secretive human separatist group called the Fringe Dwellers. After weeks of encrypted messages and dead drops, Jacob finally made contact with their enigmatic leader, Kai Ren. "Why should I trust you?" Kai's gruff voice crackled over the comm. "Last time I worked with Earth humans, it didn't end well." "Because we have a common enemy," Jacob replied. "The Council tortured my son. We're fighting back, but we need help." There was a long pause before Kai spoke again. "Fine, one meeting, but if I smell a trap, you're dead." The rendezvous took place on a barren, uncharted moon. Jacob's ship touched down next to a battered freighter. As he exited, a dozen armed figures emerged from the shadows, weapons trained on him. Kyron stepped forward, his weathered face etched with suspicion. "You claim the Council tortured a child. Prove it." Luis pulled up the footage on his holo projector. The sounds of Timmy's screams filled the air as they watched the Pakled commander brutalizing the boy. When it cut to Ambassador Vox dismissing Timmy's suffering, Kai's face contorted with rage. "Those bastards," he snarled. 20,000 of my people stand ready to fight. What's the plan?" They formulated a bold assault on Altair Prime, the heart of Council territory. Fringe dweller ships engaged the orbital defenses, while strike teams slipped through to the surface. Jacob led the ground assault, his rifle blazing as they fought block by block towards the Council headquarters. Alien peacekeepers fell before their advance, but the rebels took heavy losses too. Jacob saw good men and women cut down around him, their bodies littering the streets, but still they pushed on. Finally, they breached the inner sanctum, and there stood Ambassador Vox, sneering at the human intruders. "You primitive fools," Vox hissed. "Did you really think you could defeat us?" Jacob charged, dodging Vox's cybernetically enhanced blows. The alien was fast, but Jacob's fury made him faster. He slammed Vox against the wall, arm pressed to the ambassador's throat. "This is for Timmy," Jacob growled. With Vox as a hostage, the Council's resistance crumbled. Jacob broadcast their victory across the galaxy. "The Council's reign of terror is over. Humanity will no longer be subjugated. We are free." But as the cheers died down, Jacob knew this was just the beginning. The Pakleds and other threats still loomed, but for now, they had struck a mighty blow against their oppressors. The real war was just beginning. Jacob stood on the bridge of the captured Council warship, staring out at the swirling gases of the Krillon Nebula. The blue-green clouds churned, obscuring the massive Pakled armada that lay in wait. He turned to Mike Tanner, who sat at the helm. "You ready for this, old friend?" Jacob asked. Mike nodded, his face set with focus. "Those Pakled bastards won't know what hit them." Jacob clapped him on the shoulder, then headed to the shuttle bay where Luis and the rest of the ground team were gearing up. The plan was risky. While Mike led the fleet in a frontal assault, Jacob's team would slip behind enemy lines and take out their early warning systems. As the shuttle rocketed out into the nebula, Jacob felt the familiar surge of adrenaline. They weaved through the gas clouds, sensors on high alert for Pakled patrols. Suddenly, a massive shape loomed out of the mist, a Pakled corvette. "Evasive maneuvers," Jacob barked. The shuttle pilot sent them into a spiraling dive, narrowly avoiding a particle beam that lanced past them. Luis returned fire with the shuttle's pulse cannons, scoring hits along the corvette's hull. As they fled deeper into the nebula, the Pakled ship fell back, not wanting to stray too far from the main fleet. Over the next 48 hours, Jacob's team struck swiftly and silently. They infiltrated Pakled sensor stations, planting viruses and explosives. By the time the Pakled commanders realized what was happening, it was too late. Jacob watched from a ridge as Mike's fleet dropped out of FTL, catching the Pakled armada completely off guard. Energy weapons flashed and torpedoes streaked across space as the two forces clashed. "That's our cue," Jacob said. "Let's pay a visit to the Pakled flagship." They used the chaos of the battle to slip aboard the massive vessel. Pakled crew members fell before their blaster fire as they fought their way to the bridge. When they finally breached the command center, they came face to face with Warlord Grunk, 8 feet of muscle and cybernetic implants. Grunk roared and charged, swinging a massive energy axe. Jacob and Luis dove aside, peppering the warlord with blaster bolts that seemed to have little effect. Luis tossed Jacob a plasma grenade, which he activated and hurled at Grunk's feet. The explosion sent the warlord crashing to the deck. As Grunk struggled to rise, Jacob planted his boot on the alien's chest and leveled his blaster. "This is for every human child you tortured," Jacob snarled, pulling the trigger. With Grunk dead, Jacob accessed the ship's systems and transmitted the surrender code to the Pakled fleet. Then he set the countdown on the tactical nukes they'd brought. "Time to go," he shouted. They sprinted back to their shuttle, blast doors sealing shut behind them as they fled the doomed flagship. Jacob looked back just in time to see the massive ship tear itself apart in a blinding explosion that set off a chain reaction through the Pakled fleet. In the aftermath, Jacob broadcast a message to the galaxy. "The Pakled threat has been eliminated. Let this serve as a warning to all who would threaten humanity or our allies. We will not rest until the corrupt council is dismantled and true justice prevails." Back on Earth, Mary sat with Timmy, watching the broadcast. Tears welled in her eyes as she turned to her son. "That's your father," she said softly. "He did all this for you." Timmy's eyes widened in awe. For the first time since his ordeal, a small smile tugged at his lips. But even as humanity celebrated, the remaining council leaders were far from defeated. In a secret bunker deep beneath Altair Prime, they convened an emergency session. "The humans have grown too powerful," one counselor hissed. "We must crush them now before it's too late." Ambassador Vox's warning echoed in Jacob's mind as reports came in of the council marshaling new forces. He knew the greatest challenges still lay ahead. Jacob Coleman stood on the bridge of the rebel flagship, his eyes fixed on the swirling ice storms of Raynov 5 below. The harsh winds howled against the viewports, a fitting backdrop to the grim task ahead. He turned to face the assembled rebel leaders, Kai Ren's weathered face set in stone, Admiral Tanner's eyes blazing with perseverance. "We've dealt the council significant blows," Jacob said, his voice low and steady. "But now we hit them where it hurts." Vox talked. "We know about their weapons lab on this frozen hellhole." Kyron leaned forward, his scarred hands gripping the tactical display. "My fringe dwellers can provide distraction. We'll hit their orbital defenses, draw attention away from your insertion." Admiral Tanner nodded. "I'll coordinate the fleet. But Jacob, this ground assault, it's a suicide mission." Jacob's face hardened. "Maybe. But if we don't take out those experimental weapons, everything we've fought for could be lost." Hours later, Jacob's strike team huddled in the belly of a stealth shuttle, plummeting through Raynov 5's turbulent atmosphere. Icy particles pelted the hull as they neared the surface. The pilot's voice crackled over the comms. "LZ in sight! Brace for landing!" The shuttle touched down with a bone-jarring thud. Jacob was first out, his boots crunching in knee-deep snow. Wind-driven ice crystals stung his exposed skin as he scanned the white wasteland. In the distance, a faint shimmer betrayed the outline of the council's hidden facility. "Move out," Jacob ordered. "Stay low, stay quiet." They trudged through the snow, each step a battle against the elements. As they neared the facility's entrance, a flash of movement caught Jacob's eye. He opened his mouth to shout a warning, but it was too late. Plasma bolts seared the air. Council shock troopers in white armor rose from concealed positions, their weapons blazing. Jacob dove for cover behind an ice formation, feeling the heat of near misses. "Ambush!" he yelled. "Return fire!" The pristine snowfield erupted into chaos. Jacob's team scrambled for whatever meager cover they could find, trading fire with the entrenched council forces. A rebel to Jacob's left took a direct hit, his scream lost in the howling wind. Jacob popped up, squeezing off precise bursts from his rifle. A trooper fell, then another. But for every enemy they dropped, it seemed two more appeared. "We're pinned down," Luis shouted over the comms. "We need to break through." Jacob gritted his teeth. "Covering fire! I'm making a run for it!" He sprinted across the open ground, plasma bolts sizzling past. With a desperate dive, he reached the facility's outer door. His fingers flew over the control panel, hacking protocols Luis had prepared cutting through the security. The massive door groaned open. "This way!" Jacob yelled to his team. "Inside! Now!" They poured through the opening, Jacob laying down, suppressing fire to cover their retreat. As the last rebel made it in, Jacob slammed the door controls. It sealed shut with a hiss, muffling the sounds of battle outside. They found themselves in a sterile white corridor, harsh lights flickering overhead. Jacob allowed himself a moment to catch his breath, then checked his team. Nearly half their number were wounded or dead. "We push on," he said grimly. "The mission—" His words were cut off as hidden panels in the walls slid open. Sleek, deadly security drones poured out, their weapons already charging. "Take cover!" Jacob shouted, diving behind a support pillar as energy beams lanced through the air. The corridor became a kill box, rebels desperately fighting for survival against the relentless AI-controlled defenders. Jacob watched in horror as more of his team fell. "Luis," he shouted over the din of battle, "we need a way out." Luis nodded, his face streaked with sweat and grime. He pulled out a compact data pad, fingers flying over the holographic interface. "Cover me! I'm going for the central system!" Jacob and the remaining rebels focused their fire, creating a protective bubble around Luis as he worked. Minutes stretched into an eternity of sustained combat. Finally, Luis let out a whoop of triumph. "I'm in, shutting down security protocols. Now!" The drones froze mid-attack, then clattered lifelessly to the floor. Jacob let out a shaky breath. "Good work. Let's move deeper. We need to find those weapons." They pressed on, moving through twisting corridors that seemed to stretch endlessly into the bowels of the facility. At last, they reached a massive blast door. Luis's hacking skills once again proved invaluable, and it slowly ground open. Jacob stepped through, then stopped dead in his tracks. The cavernous chamber beyond was filled with row upon row of stasis pods, each containing a motionless human form. "My God," he whispered, "what have they done?" He moved down the rows, checking faces. Then he saw him, older but unmistakable. "Timmy!" Jacob choked out, pressing his hand against the cold surface of the pod. "I found you, son. I found you." Rage boiled up inside him. He turned to his team, his voice hard as steel. "Plant the charges! We're blowing this hellhole sky high!" As they worked, alarms began to blare. A familiar, hated voice rang out over the facility's speakers. "Jacob Coleman," Ambassador Vox's smug tones oozed. "How good of you to join us." Jacob's blood ran cold. He spun, searching for the source of the voice, when a shimmer in the air coalesced into Vox's towering form. "Hey, you," Jacob snarled. Vox's mandibles clicked in amusement. "Did you really think you had captured me? A simple hologram was enough to fool you primates." Jacob raised his weapon, but Vox was faster. A cybernetically enhanced limb lashed out, sending Jacob sprawling. "I've looked forward to this," Vox hissed, advancing on Jacob. Jacob struggled to his feet, spitting blood. "So have I, you sadistic bastard." They clashed in a brutal, no-holds-barred brawl. Vox's alien strength and cybernetic enhancements gave him a clear advantage, but Jacob fought with the fury of a father protecting his child. Blood and sweat stung Jacob's eyes as he weathered blow after punishing blow. But each time Vox knocked him down, the thought of Timmy gave him the strength to rise again. Finally, Jacob saw his opening. As Vox wound up for another strike, Jacob ducked under the alien's guard. He drove his combat knife up and under Vox's armored carapace, twisting the blade. Vox let out an otherworldly shriek of pain and rage. Jacob pressed his advantage, raining down blows until the alien lay still. Panting, Jacob stumbled back to Timmy's stasis pod. The charges were set. It was time to go. "I've got you, son," he murmured, hefting the pod onto his shoulders. They fought their way back to the surface, the facility crumbling around them. Jacob's lungs burned as he carried Timmy through the snow, back to their escape shuttle. As they lifted off, Jacob watched the council lab vanish in a massive fireball. But the victory felt hollow. Luis and Kyren had given their lives to make this mission a success. Hours later, aboard the rebel flagship, Jacob stood watching as medical teams worked to safely revive Timmy from stasis. Admiral Tanner approached, resting a hand on Jacob's shoulder. "We did it," Tanner said quietly. "The Council's weapons program is dust. We've got them on the ropes now." Jacob nodded, his eyes never leaving his son's face. "We paid a hell of a price," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "We did," Tanner agreed. "But thanks to you, thanks to all of us, humanity has a real shot at freedom now." Jacob finally turned to face the Admiral, his expression a mix of grief and fierce drive. "Then let's finish this. For Earth, for everyone we've lost along the way." Tanner nodded grimly. "I'll set course for Earth. It's time to end the Council's reign once and for all." As Tanner left to make preparations, Jacob returned his gaze to Timmy. He took his son's hand, squeezing it gently. "We're almost home, kiddo," he whispered. "Almost home."
You have reached the end of the story. If you enjoyed this story and want to support us, please leave a like and subscribe to our channel. And for every comment that says 88, I will heart every single one of them. Thank you for your time.